We were the first organized fire department in Montgomery County. And back in the days when the people back in those days, when you had a fire, they shut down business. Everybody ran, and as time went along, the times have changed, but that was 125 years ago. Unbelievable. When I joined in 1956 with my family and all, we grew up in Takoma Park, and you lived in Takoma Park, and really in those days, you really knew the people. You knew the council people. You knew the Safeway people, the whatever the gasoline people, the people that service your car. You knew them, and it was all community. You knew the place. But the times have changed where they can be members of our fire department living anywhere as long as they meet their obligations at the fire station. Come and make a standby, tender drills and all that. So it's changed a lot, but it's better.
I transferred over there as a career guy back in 1979. And one of my reasons was it was a very strong volunteer organization. Even though I was career, I was still volunteering in another county.
We got a base of about 60 active members that are pretty active at this point. We have some that are firefighter rescuers, which they can ride both the ambulance and the fire truck. And then we have ones that are just EMS only who prefer just to ride the ambulance. So we have a mix of firefighters and EMTs.
The first building was up there, I think, in the area behind Ace Hardware, Carroll and Laurel Avenue. And then in 1927, they built that one up there at Carroll and East-West Highway, or Carroll and East-West Highway. And that's where we've been since 1927.
Back when I first started, the fire trucks didn't have doors, gasoline engines, carried 300 gallons of water, and it took you forever to get to where you were going. Our newest piece is a 2011, which we own now through the volunteer department, first time in a long time. But it has 750 gallons of water. It's automatic transmission, air conditioning, heating, and it does the job a whole lot more than what it did back in the old days.
Right now, we only have a very few administrative members, but we need the ones that are going to go out on the apparatus and provide the service more than we would the administrative, but we're happy to take both. We do have a junior program, which we are taking them at the age of 17, and by the time their first year is up, they should be able to ride as a EMS person.
Training has changed greatly. When I started, we had a 32-hour basic firefighting class. Now you have a 200-hour EMT class that we have to go to for emergency medical service training. You have 164 hours, I believe it is, for firefighter 1 and 2, which they teach you the techniques of how to fight fire. Then we also have pump classes now. We have practical rescue courses where they teach technical rescue training. We have collapse rescue training where they teach training to, in case of building construction or something like that, a collapse. Training style, it never changes. It changes every day. And we got a younger generation. Unfortunately, people have to work 2 and 3 jobs now that they don't have the freedom like we used to have. But I just like to see the camaraderie come back the way it used to be, where everybody could work together and get along together.
Just to keep things moving along for better safety for the firefighters, different, better gear, better apparatus, and things of that nature, just to keep moving things along and make it safer for us.
My pictures are nighttime pictures, and one of the things I really want to show is the galaxy, the stars that you can see when you have a dark sky. And the dark skies, unfortunately, are only in the western U.S. these days. So I go to the west, I go to different locations, and I think some of the color you see has to do with some of my other favorite themes, which are the sandstone, eroded sandstone rocks in the southwest. And so when they become part of the foreground, they tend to be very red. They tend to glow in some of the lights that I use to illuminate them. So I think that's where some of the color comes from. But my goal is to show the combination of that foreground, the interesting shapes and structures of the landscape, along with the galaxy and the night sky.
I have a set of photography that's both canvas and prints that are mounted in old frames, and they represent the nature revisited work that all the artists are showing. So in my case, I picked from a selection of island visits, coastal visits, and other work that I've done around the globe, capturing sort of that interplay between the human and the nature. So it's a mix of different types of photography from around the globe.
This series is small paintings. They're kind of my personal holy relics from these epic hikes that I do, different parts of the world. And in those settings, in cathedrals and temples, a lot of times their holy relics are very small and have gold. So when I was thinking about how to honor what I consider sacred from my hikes, that came to mind was the scale. So that's one reason why they're small.
I have a small two-place experimental airplane that I fly, and I take my photographs from the airplane. In my early 20s, I was very interested in photography, and did land photography for a while, but didn't really take it that far. And in the 90s, I started doing oil painting. And I found that with oil painting, I was able to sort of express these wonderful, intangible, magical qualities in the composition that conveyed more of a sense of feel and mystery. And then in 2003, I started flying ultralight airplanes. And when I started bringing my camera on board, I started looking at the landscape below me and seeing compositions in the earth that were like paintings. And I started sort of following the landscape and the contour and the patterns of the landscape and finding more and more material that was abstract in places like coal mines and quarries and excavations where the materials of the earth had been rearranged and brought to the surface of the earth, and it became like a palette of colors and forms and textures that I was able to use to create these compositions from the air.
I've always been a hiker and a walker, and I've had big dogs, so that's gotten me outside. And we live in a beautiful place, and the hikes started getting longer and longer. And one day I watched a film about a hike called the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And as soon as I saw that film, I knew that I had to do that hike. It called to me. And it took 2 years to convince everybody to let me go. But yes.
I've always been interested in photography. I've always been more interested in landscapes and kind of the shapes and forms than I am of people or urban structures. So it's kind of natural to do that. And once you go out west and get exposed to the night sky, it just is very attractive to try to take pictures of that. It's also a technical challenge, and I really enjoy the technical challenge. I'm very technically based. I do a lot of technical things. I'm a scientist by profession, so this was a natural kind of outgrowth of that. The cameras that I use now are all digital. So you've got a digital sensor, and that sensor has certain capabilities that film literally didn't have. And so in 20 seconds, I can take a picture to show more stars and the galaxy and more color, more things than you could do with film cameras. It's complicated in that you have to then know how to process that and how to put things together correctly. If I take a different exposure for the foreground, I'm using lenses that are typically wide open, so they have a very shallow depth of focus. And so sometimes I have to take multiple pictures and stack them together in a program like Photoshop to get the full effect and to get everything looking like it's in focus. So the technical details are very challenging in some of the pictures.
People seem to really, they really like the paintings of my boots, the hiking boots, because to me there's nothing more sacred than a pair of boots that is working for you still after 400 miles, that hasn't fallen apart, hasn't given you blisters. So I put them on gold leaf on these little paintings. So people like the boots, and people seem to like the animals a lot as well. When you're outside walking 6, 8, 10 hours a day, you meet a lot of animals and insects. There's one little painting called Tomodachi, which means friends in Japanese. And when you're hiking by yourself, you meet different people and you form a little family. Sometimes it's a temporary family, but so I think that the two women in that painting were two family members. I think they became my family for a few days. So that brings back just a great memory of sharing our food, camping together.
I have my camera with me all the time, and so I'm trying to capture what I can see right in the moment when I'm doing the work that I'm doing. And in some cases, you'll look at the images and feel like it's fine art. In other cases, it's clearly I'm doing documentation. And so some of my work is, in fact, to document the changes that are going on, the pressures, the challenges, and sort of the threats to those areas. So sometimes it's a camera standing in the water, sometimes underwater, sometimes just kind of a random moment where we catch a person or an activity that's going on. I spend a lot of time doing work on islands and coastlines globally, and that work is primarily in resilience and sustainability, and in the case of this work, trying to storytell and show those kinds of changes that are happening on. So for me, I have one particular project that I'm working on in Newfoundland in Canada, which is both film and photography, and there it's a whole social cultural change and livelihood change that's going on. It isn't just the threats that are environmental or natural. It's really changing how people are living, and that's happening globally in all kinds of different ways.
Many of the photographs seem like they're very still and composed images, which they are, but they're being made from this perspective where everything is happening almost in chaos. The noise of the plane, the wind, the sound of the engine. I may be cold, I may be tired, I may be hungry, I may have to use the bathroom. All these things happening at the same time. But I'm looking at the earth, and I become more and more drawn into the colors and the forms that I'm seeing, and then it becomes a singular experience where nothing else really matters. Of course, safety is an important thing because it is about the most dangerous way to try to take photographs, I suppose. But it's really about trying to sort of capture these moments, these Zen moments of beauty in the middle of everything else that's going on at the same time. It's more about trying to capture the mystery. And there's as much as mystery and oftentimes what I'm looking at and not even necessarily understanding how did that formation come to be? Why is that there? And what's the history of it? What led to that formation, that landscape being transposed into the way it is? And I think to me there's a real sense of deepening of our own humanism in the things that we don't understand, the mysteries, and it makes me want to know more and want to see more and want to learn more, want to experience more.
Well, I'm a visual artist and a musician, and that helps me make sense of the world, is to make art out of it. And it was such a moving, amazing experience for me that when I came home, that was a way to share it with others, and also to have these little special moments little reminders of those special moments.
We, as artists, when we're together, have more opportunity to bring more people together to see all the work. And Takoma Park itself has made that possible through the selection of the four of us for this particular show, the Nature Revisited. But anytime, like Art Hop or anything like that the city does or anyone else does, where they can kind of grab citizens and grab the artists and grab the storytellers, it's really a great opportunity. So I'm super happy that we have this chance.
I've tried to intellectualize the experience, and basically it's just drawing in public. So for me to make kind of like a theoretical assumption around what happens when people watch other people, which is what I do. I'll go out and I'll draw in public, and I'll draw the structures first, and then take note of the people there. And a lot of times interactions will happen based on just passerby curiosity. Certain environments, sometimes sensitive locations that are prone to, say, terror attacks, or that have some kind of way of having some kind of surveillance in place already. I'd like to see what it's like to look back at other people who are in authority. There's a policing of the gays, on the East Coast especially. It's pretty apparent, and it's doubly so because I'm a black man. I think that might I take that into consideration. The way that artists do work in public, if they're doing anything from drawing to performing, I think people will take notice. So I'm just kind of making light of that, making a satire out of it in a bit of a way, and then kind of exposing the system for what it is.
The more I explored this programming language, which it's like a pretty limited, it's just like a different version of Java, which is a much more complex language. So there's restrictions, so I would kind of run up against some of those too, and run up against those with the files and how they were rendered. And I was like, oh wow, like if I try to read the image this way in the program, like all of a sudden everything's really huge. All the all the pixels are now huge instead of a tiny 1 pixel sized bit. Water's a liminal space to me, and in many ways, especially when you're on the East Coast, it's all the same body of water. And then so I could be looking at water or sitting in water that I had been in as a baby. So then as I was thinking about memory, I was like, wow, this, water's kind of transcending that. Definitely, I'm very interested in breaking down these images into their technical components in a way that eerily makes us think about the way that they're composed. I haven't really explicitly tapped into the supernatural. I'm definitely thinking about memory though, and I think there's a little bit that becomes kind of eerie and ghostly when things fade in and out of your memory. All of the images that I use and videos I take in a very informal, casual way, usually on my phone, so low resolution. And I source my, the photos that I kind of make these weird blocky pixel images from photos I've taken either recently or in past. And so all the pictures with figures in them are family photos. And I've kind of blocked, pixelated myself out because there's kind of these different bodies of water. So I'm not trying to combine these two senses of space.
Child, I was always making art, declared myself an artist, but for a long time I was a frustrated painter, and I found printmaking as a medium, and it's been a whole nother world since then. A lot of the work that I do in printmaking is environmentally friendly, process-driven, no acids, no terpenoids, turpentines, things like that. So everything's made with soy-based inks, and everything is experimental. So a lot of these pieces have been made from recycled materials and overlapping different materials, and then figuring out how these work through the press the best way. These three together are my favorite because I usually don't add much color other than this muted color palette, which I think is colorful, but I went a little out of my realm and added these bits of orange in there. So before, I was sort of traditionally trained in oil paints and processes that were not in this way, so I sort of played around more and more and developed this as I went. This is the most color I've worked with in a while, actually, and I like very muted color palettes. I like textures, layers, things that feel organic and show how you can repurpose things that maybe aren't organic to create these layers and depths.
I'm going to be definitely continuing with glitch and kind of compressed images because there's still so much that I can do out of that, so much that like I can think about and like instill more memories to even kind of mine.
We deal with so much trauma in this country that it's hard to recognize what it is, what it looks like, you know, on the outside. And I fail to recognize that too sometimes. So it's just to take notice of that we have to keep in our minds, you know, what has happened for the years and years of like just struggle and hurt and pain that have gone through, you know, the creation of our country.